And we should be live on Facebook right now. So welcome, 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 everybody. It's been a little while that I haven't been here for Feck's Sake Marketing Adventures with Carmel. That is all about me bringing you some awesome people that are behind the scenes sometimes, or even front the scenes, but they are the business owners, so that you can hear about some of the trials, tribulations, and the triumphs of how people have got past some of those things that may be actually something in your business right now that's getting in the way. So today with me, you may have seen him before, you've definitely heard him and I before, I'm sure, is the amazing Justin Paul. Justin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carmel. Thank you. Appreciate having me back again. Always fun having a chat with you. So yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we have titled today, it's about why some entrepreneurs make money and why some don't. Yes. And we're going to delve into the psychology of that a little bit in a few moments, because some people call themselves quite loosely, I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a mompreneur, or I'm a bloody whatever preneur they want to put on it. But the truth is that it's not always the case, because business owners aren't always entrepreneurs. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's human nature to have our egos want to identify with titles and things, and entrepreneurship, look, it's a real thing. However, when you look at the spectrum, there are people who, they walk the talk and they get the kind of results that are just gobsmacking amazing. And then if you look at, and I guess it's like any spectrum, any endeavor, you'll always find that very, that 1 to 3% that are just exceptional. And then everyone else will sort of fall within the realms. But I've noticed myself, it took me a long time to get comfortable with this idea of being an entrepreneur, because it's got to be backed up by results. Otherwise, it's just wordsmithing. You like the idea, you like the notion, but the reality is very different from the perception.
Yeah. And you're the creator, owner, and of course, host of your own podcast, which is The Time and Money Machine. Did I get that right? I did.
Yeah, the Money and Time Machine, yes.
Money and Time. I don't know why I have a mental block. I always say it backwards, so I'm so conscious of it, trying to say it forwards. I said it backwards anyway. Which you talk a lot about it being a machine of this idea of money and time. And I think it really ties in so well with that idea of being an entrepreneur. The best definition of, well, not completely definition, but explanation I heard about being an entrepreneur, because my perception previously was, entrepreneurs are these business people, they have ideas, they just do new stuff. But an actual entrepreneur is somebody who sees something that already exists, and they know how to, or can, or see the opportunity in how to monetize it. So they're not going out and making new things all the time at all. They just are people who have a frame of mind that can see opportunity.
Yes.
So when we talk about entrepreneurs, and as the title says, why some make money and some don't, is it, do you believe, because people are just calling themselves an entrepreneur rather than being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, look, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong if in your mind you want to identify and you have a desire to be an entrepreneur. By all means, it all starts with the self-image. We all have an image, and so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's just a process of transmuting this image of who you are into real world results. And I think if you talk about entrepreneurship, there's really only two ways you can do anything in life. One is sustainable and one is unsustainable. So there are a lot of people that can look the goods. I was just doing a webinar just last night. It was a trading webinar, and I won't mention the chap's name, but he said he's sick to death of people renting Rolls Royces and Bentleys and taking photos of themselves in their B&B mansions, but that's not the reality. Now he understands what they're doing, but look, I think entrepreneurship is really a thinking system, and I think you alluded to it, that who is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is someone that just has a post-conventional view of the world. And what I mean by that is all of us grew up as children, and we have a preview of the world in all its glory and its infinite possibilities. But somewhere along the line, that all comes to a stop when we get to an age where we have to go to school, and we then learn that we have to be a certain way, we have to say certain things and act a certain way, and all in the realm of being safe. And so if you look at an entrepreneur, they've probably gone through that process but realized, no, I think this is all BS. And then they have a post view of the world where they can see it from a distance. But now as a well, I don't know whether they have to necessarily be adults, but they've got a view of the world where they say, look, I can still see all the infinite possibilities, but now as an adult or someone of sound mind, I can now find ways of creating opportunities, whereas most people are sort of in a conventional mode of thinking. Entrepreneurs tend to be post-conventional, so they see things very different, and as a result, they act very different, and as a result, they get different sort of results. So it's no mystery to them as to why they're able to do something that other people just think, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So one of the things as well in this thing of entrepreneurship was, and I think you and I have both heard this being said, is the very first step. And I love what you said. It doesn't mean that you have to be a certain age or anything, but the very first step is you have to believe it, regardless of anything else, is actually having a belief that, yes, I can, or yes, I can see the opportunity, or yes, I am going to be successful. People too often have the idea of, when I see it, I'll believe it. And it's quite the opposite, because it's when you believe it, then you think it, then you actually start to be it. And I'm not talking about hiring the big cars and things like that. And that's the misconception. It's in my head. I don't care what you say. I know I'm that. I know I'm on the way. So, and then you behave it. And then, it's just the physical world catches up, because we quite often hear of people in maybe a poor family, or they've come out in some poor thing, and then they have turned out to be multimillionaires. Well, how are that? They've seen opportunities along the way, and I would call them more entrepreneurial than the people who think they are, just because they have. And I'm going to say this, and some people might be upset, and that's not my intention, but some people who have literally bought themselves a job.
Yes.
Because that's what we do when we start business. We buy ourselves a job. So if an entrepreneur, as far as, because I know you've done a lot of study around this and the mind and the money and the game and all of this. So if an entrepreneur in yours, and I don't like using the word mindset, and we know why, because I don't want to set mind, but that's a whole other story. In your experience and your reading and your knowledge, why is it that one entrepreneur will make money or a living and the other one won't? Is it just purely because they're not really an entrepreneur, or is it something else?
No, far from it. I mean, when I created the Money and Time Machine, I've based the content of the Money and Time Machine on 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is the notion of risk. The second pillar is understanding debt. The third pillar is all about, finding alternative ways of making money. And the fourth pillar is all about developing skills. But if we go back to the very first one, which is debt, I think that'll go part way to, answering the question. But debt is such a fascinating concept, because if you ask most people, a risk is the first one. If you ask most people what their thoughts on the notion or the idea of risk is, most people have a lot of challenges articulating it. They intuitively know that what they want to do is anything that's risky, they want to avoid. Now, when you consider that the best entrepreneurs are not necessarily risk averse, they're just better risk assessors. And, and I actually did an episode with a multi-millionaire serial entrepreneur on the very notion of risk. And it was fascinating to me because he recommended a book, which is quite a dense book. And like he did, I read it. And it was literally the notion of risk on a sort of a global scale in terms of business, but it didn't really mean a great deal. And I had to do what he did, which was to understand risk in a way that is practical in everyday life. Because you and I get into a car to buy groceries or take the kids to school, we never contemplated any junction that is a risky behavior. Not necessarily because I'm worried about me, but I'm now entering onto the road with hundreds, if not thousands of people. I don't think anything about getting onto a plane and traveling somewhere, except that there's every possibility that plane could crash. So I don't really conceptualize it. So I had to really break down risk in a manner that was useful and practical to me, that I could use in marketing, in business, in trading, that made me not afraid of taking risks. And ultimately what I was able to deduce, the notion of risk is essentially the same explanation that my mentor gave me, which is in any given context, it's the probability of making ineffective choices. So what does that mean? Well, people who are entrepreneurial, they're great, they're very astute at getting information and interpreting information in such a way that they minimize risk. And that's why when you see people do amazing things, you say, oh, you know, they were lucky, they were that. No, the fact of the matter is, if you were in the same position that they were, you probably wouldn't have achieved the results that they have, because they have a perception of the world that is very different. So so look, it's all about people who are very, very successful, understand that risk is part and parcel of everything they do, but they have great mechanisms for gathering enough data so that when they do make those decisions, they minimize that risk, hence the reason they're able to achieve. And and I think there's just not enough conversation around this notion of risk, which is why, as I said, I did a whole podcast episode on it, but it's something that I take with me with everything I do. So I
love that, because I think we're trained, we're programmed, whatever word you want to put on it, from the time we're, you know, knee high to a grasshopper, because that's what society kind of tells us, is that risk is quite often is pain. Risk equals pain, because if it goes wrong. And you're right, you don't think about jumping into the car, it just becomes so normal. But anything that's outside our comfort zone, the stuff that we're used to, so we've become accustomed to being in a car as a child, or riding a bike or whatever like that. So we don't think about it. When it's something that's uncomfortable outside that, and like, for example, and I know you've done this, I've done this, whatever, but entrepreneurial wise, I had a belief that I was going to get somewhere. Now, I didn't care where I got the money or whatever. I'm happy to hop out and get a part-time job, get a casual job or whatever to fund me to do that. Whereas other people have, and I did have at one stage a good few years ago, I had a level of shame. People will think that it's not working if I have to go out and get this. Well, I go out and earn the money to do that. That's different, but I didn't always have that frame of mind. What changed for me, and I believe this is what I observe in other people, is there's a certainty and a confidence in self that has to come, that no matter the risk, I'll be okay. Yeah. Would you agree that that's something that changes? And with an entrepreneur, they're kind of like, well, no matter the risk, I'll still be okay. I know I can work my way out of it.
Look, absolutely. If you look at the Kerwin Rays, the Ryan Deeses, the Frank Kerns, the yours truly, the Carmel Murphys, the Nicole Ashbys, and the Sarah Lucy Roses of the world, everybody tends to forget that they started somewhere, and they just see you as who you are, and they say, you know, you're fortunate, you were smart, you were this. So they make up a whole lot of
one-dimensional little thing,
But the reality, and you said something, and I think it was Wednesday, I went to an evening, a business evening, and I really, you know, sometimes it's really disappointing when people use cliches and like comfort zone, as if the comfort zone is the only zone that exists. You know, I guess we use it, but if you look at what is a comfort zone is simply a place where all of us typically feel safe. And in reference to the idea of risk, we'll avoid it because we feel safe. But there is also the fear zone. So this is where we move away from our comfort zones. But look, ultimately, and I'm guilty of it. We step out, and then you find excuses to go back. We get out there, we feel a lack of confidence, so we go back to what we know.
Yes.
Yes. So all things said, but if you go then beyond that fear zone, there's another zone, and that's the learning zone. This is where effectively, I think, the way I see it is, it's where I essentially acquired all my new skills. I had to go to acquire new skills. I don't know, I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's where I had to begin dealing with challenges that I'd never dealt with before. And
Yeah.
of course, my comfort zone looked really appealing. I just wanted to make a beeline for it. But then before, there's the learning zone, but there is another zone, which is the actual growth zone. So this is where, when you see people that look like, oh, they've achieved and they've done well, we don't realize, well, they went from the comfort, they went from the fear, they went from fear into learning, and now they're into the growth zone where, I guess all things said and done, you've got purpose. You just look so eloquent and confident. You're living your dream. You're able to conquer objectives that a year or two or three or 5 or 10 just seemed insurmountable. So you just have to go through those zones, but it's a journey. And I just find that most people, Carmel, and look, I can't lay blame, because it took me 5 years to get my podcast up and running. So what happened? Well, I was always making a beeline for the comfort zone. Sometimes I'd get so far and people would say, Justin, why does it take so long? It's been a couple of years. What's going on? And something would happen, and I'd pout and go back. But look, the more practice you have it, I don't know who said it, experience is a better guide than listen to other people. So there's just no other way other than you doing the steps, and regardless of all the information out there, and people typically don't stay there long enough to see
that's the thing. I used to call it the comfort zone cha-cha, because it was like, you go in, you go back, you go in, you go back. And look, coming from my background, for example, and it was very conservative, very, work hard, do this and the other. There was a lot of discomfort, but somewhere along the way, I did a lot of work, obviously, on ourselves, which I think is a big part of it. But I discovered that I needed to reframe what discomfort was to me. Instead of going, oh, I'm uncomfortable, and we don't logically say that, I'll go back here. I started going, hallelujah, I'm uncomfortable. That means something exciting is going to happen, or I'm going to learn something new. And and it took me a long time too, but it's what started to edge me out into more of that pain. And I'll learn a little bit. And okay, I might go back a bit, but this time I'm not quite in as deep in that comfort zone as I was.
Yes.
Was that the same for you, to do that process?
Yeah, of course. But for the fact that I really began to understand that it's all about investing. The more you can invest in yourself, the more access you have to information, people, conversations, with people who can assist you. Because I'm a bit of part of my personality is I'm a bit stubborn, and so I always had this thing of, I don't need anyone's help, and I'm going to do it my way. Now, look, you and I have both met people who have that cognitive driver called discovery. They can start from scratch and say, listen, I want to make $1 million. And so now they'll start reading books, and they just have this remarkable ability to find the information, put it into practice, get results, and modify it. And then what would you know? A few years down the track, make $1 million. Now, for me, I wish I could say that I was able to do that. But what I needed was to be in the energy orbit and the environment of people who had already achieved things. And when I changed my attitude from being stubborn to, listen, a bit of humility doesn't go astray. I was good at certain things, and I think a bit like that comfort zone, I just wanted to identify with that part of me that was always confident and had this bravado. But the reality is, when I tried to make in the early days of entrepreneurship, you just feel like though you're getting slapped around a bit. And then when I realized, hang on, other people have had the experiences that I want to achieve. How about I just ask for a bit of help? And that's what I do now. I spend most of my time with other people who have achieved the kind of things, because I find it helps my learning process a lot easier. it's easy on my confidence, because you still got to do the work. I hate to say it, there's nobody that's going to do the work for you. But I found for me, it's been one of the easiest ways. I've probably made more progress allowing myself to be helped by other people who have already done. They can do it. They can do the same thing that they. I guess they have this ability to do things on cue. They are able to do it repeatedly, so you just know that they are the real McCoy. But that's what I've done. That's as simple as it is. That's all I've really done. Whether it's podcasting, trading, online marketing, I just make sure I'm not the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, and I love that you say that. And it's about, like, as you say, investing in yourself, which is, we know, that the best investment you can make. But investing in yourself with somebody that's a little bit ahead of you and a big bit ahead of you, but then immersing yourself into a tribe, into a supportive environment. And we all know, and anyone who's watching this, if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, somebody somewhere along the line has said, oh, why don't you just go back and get a job? And that's not what you need. You want that support to actually help you to keep going and say, yeah, that didn't work, but I know you. I actually remember the point when my dad did that. Because my dad, rest his soul, he was very, oh my God, Carmel, you're changing jobs all the time, because I was in hospitality. That's what we do. Each time I was actually leveling up, but to him, I was just changing jobs. He had been in a job for 35 years. What are they going to think? They'll look at your resume. They'll never hire you. And there came a time, and it was a good few years before he passed away, he started saying, well, I know if it can be done, you can do it. I know that you'll be able to do it. And it was huge, because it was like, oh, you were telling me not to change my job, and all of a sudden you think I'm doing amazing stuff. But it's not that people want to hold you back, although there is a few of those people, but it's more that they don't have a reference point for where you want to be, so they can't actually help you get there. So tell us with the podcast. So now that you have your podcast up and going, and I have to say, it has gone in leaps and bounds from when you started. You've kind of gone, as you said, you're practicing, you're doing whatever. And that's what we all do. Who knew that I would be teaching people how to make videos, for God's sake, a few years ago? I wasn't even on my radar. And now we do. So tell me, with your podcast now, what, if you were to put it in a kind of a short couple of sentences, what would you say now is the best purpose and the best value in that podcast for somebody who wants to listen to it? How is it going to help them grow?
Look, it's one of the questions you asked me in the last time you and I interviewed. You said that the content was very varied. And it was the first time I'd actually heard it, because it seemed normal to me, but I'd never considered how other people might interpret, because it appears to be all over the place. But as I said, because the podcast is based on the pillar of understanding what debt is, it's multi-layered, because it's literally a story. If you really think about it, it's a story of how you can go from point A to point B. But I actually highlight all of the elements that I think are critical. Most people tend to consume information from a point of view where they like to observe information. Rather, I want you to interpret it. I want you to really think about the content of the information, and I want you to be able to see that it's kind of like an airplane landing in the night. You can actually see the lights, and that's all I'm doing. I'm sort of highlighting for people the pathway, and I probably want to talk about a lot of the factors that I find, especially in the personal development arena, they tend to avoid. It's good to feel good, and I've got no issues with people feeling pumped up and so forth. But if you can't maintain that sustainability, as I said, from the comfort zone, the fear zone, you always tend to gravitate back to what you've known, whereas reality is you just need to stick the course and going forward. So it is multi-layered, but I want people to really spend time thinking about their own success. That's really what my hope is, and I'm kind of hoping that I'm sharing stuff that, typically speaking, they're not going to hear elsewhere.
Yeah, and you do have some amazing guests on there too, from a variety of places. But again, a bit like this show was made for people that are trying to market their business or whatever, to understand there are other people before you, and they have stuffed up, and they have overcome, and they have gone, and maybe that's your hurdle that you need to get through now. And I think people do love hearing stories as well.
Yeah.
They love to hear other people's stories, and you interview so well. I love how you interview, and you get the best out of the people for that. So with all that in mind, what yours is podcast, which is predominantly auditory, but I know that you're dabbling a bit more in video as well. So tell us a bit about how you see business moving forward, and how podcast and video can actually go together, or do they go together, or are they just two parts of a different car, if you like?
No, on the contrary, I'll be very honest. I mentioned to you earlier, it took me 5 years to get my act together to do the podcast, because I had a lot of the inner critic nonsense going in my head, like, who's going to listen to me? Who am I to think that I reserve the right to talk about these various topics? And so in essence, podcasting was nice because I could hide behind the podcast. I was just a voice, because people always said you got a voice for radio. So, that was good. But the reality is we're living in an age of accelerated change, and what's becoming evident now, and I'm hearing it and I'm seeing it, is that a lot more people prefer video, and at the end of the day, from marketing. Well, what is marketing? Marketing is the oxygen that gives life to your business. And at the end of the day, I don't give a Tiffany's toss what you may think about it. It's about your market. What do they prefer? And what I'm finding now is, video content is what they are demanding. So I can stick to maybe I'm just going to stick to my podcasting. So now I'm looking to transfer my podcasting into the YouTube space. So putting it on video, and doing perhaps more live stuff. But I've been spending probably the last month doing a lot of video content, so that, and let's be honest, most people who are doing their online businesses, you are actually the product. So I hate to say it, but you've got to come out from behind the screen so that people can actually see, it's Carmel Murphy, it's Justin Paul, it's Sarah Lucy. People want to relate to you. And so to the degree that I've had to overcome whatever issues I have about, putting yourself out there, because if you recall, I talked about the fear zone. One of the big things that plays on is the opinions of other people. And even though I may seem reasonably confident, and listen, I've come a long way from what I was a couple of years ago, there's still that, niggling, oh my God, what are people? And so, you have to expose yourself to that. But the more practice you have it, the better you become at it. But more importantly, you put yourself out there to actually relate to the people who are actually looking for your message. What you say actually resonates with them, and people are looking for that connection. So I think video is if I didn't think so 6 months ago, I'm convinced now is the way to go forward.
Oh, absolutely. Even Instagram, for example, are already saying that they'll be showing more videos than they will stationary or text as well. So again, as I said a few years ago, who the bloody hell knew? But again, as we were doing copywriting and we were doing marketing and we were doing all this, we recognized as we were going that there was more and more people talking about video and more stats coming out on video. And that's why we chose to go down that. One of the things I have found about marketing, people have this big misconception, and I was one of them. It's like, marketing, oh my God, I hate that. What? I can't do that marketing. It's like, marketing is you market yourself and sell yourself all the time. When you want to get a new job, what do? You send a resume, you arrive being the best you can be. It's all marketing. Whereas people just think it's this big, bad, scary bloody thing, and it's not at all. So I love that the video that you're getting into video, and there's so many free apps to use, and there's so many cheap apps to use, but it's really important to know who it is you're talking to and the message that they're searching for. And that's easier to find than you would think when you know how. So just kind of to bring it back to why some entrepreneurs make money and some don't, it's purely because they're actually not entrepreneurs at all. They're quite often a business owner that has a job, and that's no disrespect for anyone, but it's starting to look at how often are you outside that comfort zone, and how often have you got an opportunity self, so that kind of self switched on to see opportunities, rather than, and again, you've seen so many as well, head down, ass up, going, oh my God, I have to work 50, 60, 70, 80 hours. And I'm not saying you don't have to put the work in, but it doesn't have to be your job to do that all the time. If it's that, you're probably in a job, not necessarily in an entrepreneurial space.
Oh,
So
look, I couldn't agree more. There's a great principle called the Peter principle, where they say people raise to their level of incompetency, you know, and that's not a bad indictment, but
yeah,
a lot of times people who, especially if you're driven and you're a high achiever and you've worked for other people, there's the desire, look, I'm going to go and do it on my own, which is wonderful. I would always encourage, and I, high five to anyone who's ever done it.
yeah,
But then you get to a realization that there are certain skills that you need to nurture and develop in order to, grow beyond just this
yeah,
idea of I'm a business owner. And that's where I think people stop, and they think that what got them there is enough to get them to where they want to go. And that's and
that's
when you
just
contrast that to someone who is enterprising in the way they look at the world, they're entrepreneurial in their perceptions, they think differently, hence the reason they act differently. And as I said, it's hence the reason they seem to more effortlessly achieve the kind of results that just leave people stumped. I don't know how he or she did it, because he or she did it, but it is a different psychology. And I think all too often we are attracted to the effects end, but not the causality. And
yeah,
that's where I focus a lot of the money and time machine. I'm trying to get people to understand that, what causes somebody. Money doesn't cause itself. Okay,
no, no,
and this, it's easy to sell you this idea that money, it doesn't. So you need to understand it, and it always comes down to the psychology, and the psychology is 90% of your journey, of your
yeah,
growth. Look
absolutely,
everywhere you go. Somebody, I mean, I'm surrounded by books here on how to. How to is wonderful. It is important. Believe you me, you need it. But I'm oftentimes surprised how people can say, listen, I made $1 million. Here's my blueprint. And you can hand this blueprint to 1,000 people, and yet maybe one or two out of that entire 1,000 will be able to
we'll
do
do
the
it.
exact the
And
results that you
yeah,
achieved. And so what's the
absolutely,
difference? Well, congratulations. You met the enterprising, the entrepreneurially minded people who just got it. It's in them. Obviously, they probably had to do a bit of practice. But people just don't want to, accept that. They want to
yeah,
go from A to B in as quick a time as possible, which is nothing wrong. Once again, I encourage you, because at least if you're going to go from A to B pretty quickly, then at least you can reverse engineer what you've done to achieve it, and then you can amplify it, because that's all entrepreneurs do. They just keep getting results, they get better at doing it, and they repeat it, and they
yeah.
experiment. So all things said and done.
And they still fall down and they feel shitty
Yeah,
about it. They feel dreadful. But the thing is, they get back up. You said a few moments ago, we still have a bit of that. What will people think? A big change for that for me was when I've mentioned it before, my sister passed away. Something in me literally snapped and went, I don't care what anybody else thinks anymore, because we could all be dead one day, and me playing small does not serve them. And
yes,
it literally was that. Now, I'm not saying I don't care completely what people think, but it definitely, that bone has gone very, very small. I don't care if I stuff up on video. People have seen me in the garden hanging out bananas or something, but I don't mind anymore,
yes.
because it gives other people also permission to do that. So we're going to make sure that we put your contact details under this as well, so people can actually get onto your podcast. And I highly recommend it, guys. Get onto the podcast. There's so much there. I might happen to show up every now and again. And it is really good. And as you work through it, it will really give you insights into, as Justin said, the risk and why people are in debt and the psychology of it. So you can start understanding yourself. I think awareness is 90% of whatever it is that goes on. If you are sitting in that space of being an entrepreneur and wondering why you're not making any money, and maybe we've touched a point where you're saying, oh, maybe I am just in a job. That's okay. That's fine. The message from today is, find somebody who has or is on the way, even if they're only 2-3 steps ahead of you, what you want. Yeah. Find them, and then get a dedicated form of some learning with them or around them, and get yourself into the environment. Bruce Lipton said, it's the environment, stupid. You can put a seed into a crack in the concrete, or you can put it into a fertile garden. Which one do you think is going to grow? Could be the same 2 seeds. the one in the fertile garden. So get yourself into a fertile environment that has your tribe that's going to support and help you to grow. If you're not sure what that environment is, make sure you message myself and Justin, and we'll point you in the right direction that works for you, not for us, for you. If it's nothing to do with us, that's fine. I'll point you in a different direction. But don't sit back and have regrets. That's one of the biggest things at the end of the life. People don't have regrets they didn't work more, but they have regrets that they didn't follow their dreams or they didn't do what they wanted to do. But for now, Justin, thank you so much for joining me here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on there. And I will say, look, the beautiful thing about the world we live in today, there are unimaginable opportunities that are forthcoming as the years sort of come on board. But I would implore you to learn some new skills. Realize that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Someone somewhere has done what it is you want. Find out who they are, get into their energy orbit, find out what they're doing, what they're reading, who they're hanging out with, and that'll be a far smoother ride. And the beauty of that is, because they've done what you want so many times, they can actually guide you. They can save you a lot of time, a lot of money. And I promise you, you will have a far greater journey, and a far better experience than if you were to try to do it on your own.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Justin. And remember, getting in their environment can be reading their books. It can be online. It doesn't have to be. You can't say, oh, but Carmel, I'm stuck here. I can't do that. There is no excuse. You can listen to Justin's podcast and you'll hear some amazing people. You can follow them. You can look at some of my stuff on YouTube, and there's some amazing people that have done what you want to do as well. You can follow them. But don't let something like, oh my God, something's happening in the world now and I can't do that. Don't let that stop you, because there is no excuse in this world of technology. But for now, from us, it's going to be bye from us.
Thank you.